Good evening. I want to welcome you to the Punta Gorda Charlotte Public Library. Although this is not my home library, I love coming visiting here. It's a beautiful library, and they have some really remarkable, talented people and great people that work here. If you haven't had a chance to walk around this library, you won't be able to do it tonight because it'll be closed, but come back tomorrow and Saturday and come visit it. It's, we have a wonderful maker space here, a 3D printer and CNC machine. Lee operates that. He teaches classes. They have a wonderful youth department, and it's a great library. I have a lot of thank yous, which is why I have this sheet here, and I'm hoping that I don't forget any of them, and if I do, call me and I will apologize, and thank you profusely. I want to start with all of you attending tonight, because without your attendance, then it's basically 7 or 8 people sitting around staring at each other. And you know how well that worked in high school. So thank you for that embarrassing that we can avoid. Of course, I want to thank all the panelists. We had done a hurricane preparedness panel right around this time last year. And I think there's some statements that bear repeating. And that is, all these people have already put in a day today, and they're coming here and they're not getting paid, and they're here because they're generous and because they care. So we're very, very lucky to have all this expertise, all this experience, and the diversity of experience that they have. So we're very, very grateful for all of them sharing that with us today. I guess just from point of honor, all of these people are not here tonight, but they had remarkable contributions to this. We start with Tracy Herman, who's our regional librarian. We would never have done the hurricane preparedness panel without her, including helping us find the stereo button. But she always seems to make everything in the libraries and the events a little bit better. She finds some way to make things really kind of magical in this county. So we're very lucky to have her as our regional librarian. I want to thank my personal supervisor at Englewood. I come from the Englewood Library, and that's Linda Citro. She gave me a lot of time to help prepare this panel and recruit a lot of people for that. So I want to say how grateful I am to her for all that support. Another person that I worked with closely, who's now the supervisor of the Port Charlotte branch, is Hannah Brown, and I encourage you to visit the Port Charlotte branch. It's a wonderful branch. We have people here tonight that are helping us for this production from the Port Charlotte branch, and Hannah was so instrumental. You're hearing us now as it's being recorded because of Hannah. Somebody has to write the check, and Hannah did it, so we're very appreciative of that. And all the other help that she does with helping us prepare resource lists and our bio sheets, and it was just Hannah being special and being Hannah, so we're very grateful to her. A shout out to Jen, who's not in the room right now, but we're being recorded. And she works at the Port Charlotte branch, and all of this material that you're getting, the handout sheets and all the things that are in our folders and the folders themselves would not happen without Jen. She's terrific. She is somebody you always want when you're putting on an event because she's just remarkably willing to roll up her sleeves, pitch in, and do a great job. So we're so grateful to Jen, and she'll see this on the recording. I want to thank Thalia Jacobs, who was instrumental in helping us with the resource sheet as well. She generally works in our Centennial building, but she had some great ideas, and if the resource sheet is really helpful to you, we can thank Thalia for a lot of that. And then for tech, we always refer to tech, and they say, well, thank you for the tech people, but we're actually going to name the people tonight. The gentleman who's doing the recording right now, that's Spencer Pullen. And we don't do this without Spencer because he's running the camera. He figured out the sound that we could work tonight. And you always want Spencer on the set because if something goes wrong, somehow he'll figure out a way to fix it. And this microphone that's working tonight is because of Lee. He runs a lot of the tech here. He teaches Makerspace. So we're very grateful to all of them. And last but not least, I just want to go on record to thank all of my coworkers at Libraries in History, because all of us get to do these programs because they're doing our job tonight. All the things that we would normally be doing, issuing library cards and doing interlibrary loans, they're doing for us. So I'm very, very grateful that they give us that opportunity to be here with you and to be with these incredible panelists that are going to share their expertise and experience tonight. From an administrative point of view, what we're going to do is if you have any questions, instead of raising your hand or shouting out the question, if you would just raise your hand, Jen and I will be running around and we will get the questions from you. And then at the end, we're going to have a Q&A. And in the Q&A, then we will ask the speakers the questions. So we find that makes it a lot more efficient use of time, and we get to more questions that way. So in your respective booklets and the folders, you should find that there's a pad in there. So if you would print out so that we can clearly read your questions, then we're happy to ask the panelists what their thoughts on that are. There's another part that's in there, and that's a thing that was often ignored, but it's our program comment card. And please take a moment to fill that out during or certainly after it, and you can feel free to drop it off at any of our 3 branches, or you can email it to it or send it to us, but that's how we find out why you like the program, what other programs you'd like to do, how you found out about it, and that helps us enormously when we do planning and program development. So I think because we want to get as much of this information in, squeezed in this short period of time, and we're covering a range of topics, we're going to just kick-start it with Patrick Fuller. He's head of emergency management. He was at a hurricane preparedness panel. He offered some wonderful insights. People love the YouTube video, and Patrick was a big part of that. So Patrick, if you would start us out with, the theme tonight really is we have these events that happen, these disruptive weather events, but how do we manage our way better through them? How do we better survive these? And so Patrick, we're going to look for his insights about from an emergency management, what little things and other things we can do to better manage our way and survive these disruptive weather events. So thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Charles. I appreciate it, and I appreciate everything you do to organize this event. Thank you to the rest of the panelists, and most of all, thank you guys for coming tonight. It shows how serious you are about being prepared for this hurricane season. I imagine most of you went through the 2022 hurricane season. If not here in Charlotte County, then somewhere in Southwest Florida, and you don't need to be reminded in depth as to what a powerful hurricane can do to our community. Just as a small comparison, Hurricane Charlie, it was a Cat 4 storm, made landfall in nearly the exact same place, and that's where the similarities end. We have the dubious distinction of having 2 Cat 4 hurricanes making landfall in our county within an 18-year period. I've yet to be able to find in historical records that level of frequency of similar events. But that really is where the similarity between those 2 storms ends. Hurricane Charlie was a very compact, fast-moving storm. Its the width across its eye was 5 miles across. Its maximum winds only extended about 25 miles out from its center. Whereas Ian was much more slow-moving. Charlie made it through the entire state in 8 hours into the Atlantic Ocean, and all of us here were hunkered down more than 8 hours from the winds of Hurricane Ian. That eye was 25 miles across. Its winds extended 75 miles out. And that's why you saw that catastrophic storm surge down in Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, even up the Caloosahatchee River. That very easily could have been us here in Charlotte County. That this where we sit could have had water from storm surge, had that just tracked slightly further north. I say that to make sure everybody understands no 2 storms are exactly the same. But what we have to do every year, regardless of what the experts out at Colorado State tell us the hurricane season is going to look like, or the National Hurricane Center for that matter, whatever their prediction is, and just for the record, the prediction this year is slightly above average, slightly below average, depends who you look at. But I don't care about the prediction. Last year, when all was said and done, that was a dead average year, 14 named storms. Hurricane Andrew in 1992, when that season was done, and Hurricane Andrew, I'm sure you all remember, whether you're living in Florida or not, that was the storm that kind of rewrote how hurricanes were handled. It changed how FEMA operated, changed how the state of Florida operated, changed how counties operate. When that season was done, that was an extremely below average season. It doesn't matter how many storms we have any given year, it just takes that one storm affecting us for it to be a busy year. So please don't focus on the predictions any given year. You have to prepare the same way year in, year out. When Charles mentions, the sort of the theme of this is the survival, the aftermath, how do you better prepare and get through a storm? Well, by preparing thoroughly, and planning for your household, that's how you get through a storm. We have a 4-step process we tell everybody year in, year out, how you need to approach every hurricane season. First off, understanding your risk. You live in Southwest Florida, you're at risk for tropical weather. Specifically, know what zone you live in. By a show of hands, who here knows what hurricane evacuation zone you are in? That's good. If you don't, please, please, please go to our website, call my office. There's still some stop signs that are still up from prior to the storm that have the collars, but you can check, you can Google Know Your Zone, Charlotte County, and plug in your address and know exactly what evacuation zone you're in. The reason why that's so important is when we call for evacuations, we don't want you to have to scramble to figure that information out. You should know year-round, hey, I live in a red zone, and me as the emergency manager, I do live in a red zone. Probably 2/3 of our county population live within those 2 lowest evacuation zones, the red and orange zones. There's a number of reasons for that. Charlotte County and Lee County and Collier County, for that matter, we're all very vulnerable to storm surge. Those evacuation zones are directly related to your levels of storm surge vulnerability. When we get a forecast from the National Hurricane Center with the potential for storm surge into any given zone, we will evacuate that zone. Because storm surge, it counts for 60% of fatalities from tropical events. So knowing what zone you're in is priority number 1. Secondly is knowing your home. And when I say that, it means, hey, do you know what building code your home's built to? After Hurricane Andrew, which rewrote a lot of the rules, Florida building code was enhanced drastically. If we look at post-storm from the last 10, 15 years, and you do an overflight, there is a clear delineation between what homes were built prior to the enhancements to Florida building code and those that are built after. For the most part, Florida building code is one of the best in the country, and you may not suffer any damage, but you're not going to have catastrophic failure. And that's generally because of wind. We're talking about wind damage. Next, after you know your threat, know what level of threat you're vulnerable to, you got to make a plan. That plan needs to include where you're going to go if you have to evacuate. By another show of hands, who evacuated during the storm? So it's a bit of a mixed bag, and this goes through the entirety of Hurricane Ian. We're in constant communications with our fellow counties in the region. We were keeping a census of how many people were going to our shelters, how heavy the traffic was on the roadways. And by and large, no county in Southwest Florida was seeing the type of people moving away from evacuation zones that they were seeing during Irma. And I think Irma was a direct relation to that. A lot of people, millions of people for that matter, evacuated in Irma because we asked them to, because we received a similar storm surge forecast. Well, it's part of the jeopardy of this job. People think we cry wolf too often. Well, a lot of people, unfortunately, people in Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, Pine Island, even the areas around the Caloosahatchee didn't evacuate, and that's why you saw a loss of life. When we call for an evacuation, I hate to say it, but probably 9 times out of 10, we're not going to get that storm surge. But it's that 10% chance that we do. That's why we ask you to evacuate. We're not going to run the risk of putting your life in jeopardy, because unfortunately, the National Hurricane Center is not perfect. They gave us essentially from Englewood Beach down to Bonita Springs, that area had the highest risk for storm surge, and they were right. It just didn't happen to be our section of the beach. It didn't have to be our section next to the closest to the water. But the worst of the storm surge was within that area. So until the Hurricane Center is able to tell us exactly the stretch of property that's going to receive storm surge, evacuation sometimes going to be called when you don't see the storm surge. So please understand, if we ask you to evacuate, it's for a reason. You may not always see the worst of it, but I'd rather you have to leave your home and go to a friend or family member's home outside of the evacuated area than to run the risk of getting that worst of the storm surge and losing your life. Part of that plan, like I said, know where you're going to go to evacuate. The best places are friend, family members' homes just outside the evacuated area. We used to joke around, still do, that Deep Creek is sort of the mountain of Charlotte County. That's probably some of the higher elevations you're going to have in Charlotte County. If you have friends there, see if you can bunk with them for a few nights. There's some other areas. Obviously Northport, east of I-75 is pretty high, although they have some freshwater flooding they had to contend with in this storm. But getting away from the coast, getting out of the evacuated areas, that's the primary objective. We have 4 shelters in Charlotte County. It's not enough. It's never going to be enough until we start seeing development further east away from the water. If I had, and you all should have guides, our disaster guides in your booklets, there's a very colorful map in there that shows all of Charlotte County and basically all of Charlotte County where people live could potentially get storm surge at some point. Luckily, for Irma, for Ian, the worst forecast we received was for our lowest 2 zones, our red and orange zone. But just keep in mind, we are a very vulnerable community to storm surge. And I know I'll keep saying storm surge because that's what keeps emergency managers up at night. That's the primary loss of life that comes from storm surge. If you have another option when you evacuate to go to other than a shelter, that should be your first and your second option. Your last option is our shelters. Not only because we don't have enough, they're not the nicest places in the world. We like to say they are the lifeboats, they're not love boats. They're schools, they're rec centers that you can hide from the wind and you're not going to be under threat of storm surge, but you're going to be jammed in there with a lot of people. They're really set aside as a last resort. They're for those folks who are working up to the 11th hour, the single moms who have no other options. The single moms and dads that have no other options, they can't get to another shelter, a site that they can go to. Shelters are there if you need them. They're pet friendly, so you can take your pets. But it's better to have another option in place. A friend, family member's home, even a hotel outside the evacuated area. Next is building your kit. I've given this is sort of my standard spiel, but we live in Florida. We don't just have the 6 months of hurricane season. In addition to that, we have severe weather season where we can see tornadoes or straight line winds. We have wildfire season. We have just random disaster that could happen from a highway crash of hazardous material season. You should always be prepared throughout the year, and that preparedness should be building a kit. A disaster supply kit that can get you through, we used to say 3 days. We've upped that to 5 to 7 days. That a large part is due to the fact that we're seeing more disasters than we ever have before, nationwide. And because of that, take 2017 for example. You had Hurricane Harvey affecting the Houston area, dropping up to 40 inches of rain in some areas, flooding out large swaths of that city. You had Hurricane Irma, which put the entire peninsula of Florida under the gun. You had Hurricane Maria a few weeks later impacting Puerto Rico as a Cat 5 storm, and you had record wildfires that year out west. There's more of these billion-dollar disasters than ever before. In fact, we've averaged 20 nationwide over the last 3 years, 18 nationwide for the last 5 years. They're just happening more often. There's a number of reasons for that. Primarily, where people are moving to very disaster-prone places. Some of it is the climate's not cooperating with us, and we're having more intense storms, more intense heat waves. But people are living in very dangerous places. Doesn't mean they can't live there, but they have to be cognizant of that, and they have to prepare for it. In building a kit that you have the supplies to get by for 5 to 7 days is one of the easiest and first steps you should take. We have a disaster sales tax holiday coming up statewide for disaster supplies. You missed the first one if you didn't take advantage of it, but the next one is late August into the first week of September towards the height of hurricane season. Start stockpiling, and don't wait till that. Then start stockpiling those non-perishable foods for 5 to 7 days. The 1 gallon of water per person per day, per pet per day, for 5 to 7 days. And when we get included in an executive order signed by the governor that includes Charlotte County declaring a state of emergency prior to landfall, that lets pharmacies dispense up to 30 days of maintenance medications. That legislation was put into place after the 04-05 hurricane season because you had communities like Charlotte County, like Punta Gorda specifically, that people couldn't get their medication because they were waiting for pharmacies to come back online. With being able to get a large quantity of your medications before landfall, you're not at the mercy of pharmacies coming back online after the storm. So please take advantage of that. Also look to the special considerations you may have. If you have small children in your home or individuals with medical conditions, stockpile those types of things that you'll need for those individuals. And pets, of course. We've known for many years, Hurricane Katrina was a great example. People won't evacuate if they don't have their pets. That's why our shelters are pet friendly. That's why there's legislation that requires every county to have at least one pet friendly shelter. Because we look at our pets as family members. So ensure that you're looking to their needs and that you can take them with you if you have to evacuate. Or if you are able to shelter in place, if you're in a zone that's not evacuated, and you live in a site-built home, then you have what you need for 5 to 7 days for both you and your pet. These are some of the simple steps. Finally, the last step we want everybody to continue to do throughout the 6 months of hurricane season is just remain informed. By a show of hands, who has signed up for Alert Charlotte? Okay, great. Hopefully by the time everyone leaves, you'll be encouraged, for those who didn't raise your hand, to sign up. If you were woken up at 4:45 a couple months ago, that wasn't Alert Charlotte. That's another incredibly important program though. That's FEMA's wireless emergency alert system. Think of the old emergency broadcast system that would come across your TV. That's what tornado warnings, hurricane warnings, storm surge warnings, and special flood threats come across. And they are life-saving warnings. So you could turn those alerts off on your phone, but I would never tell you how to do it. I don't know how to do it, but please don't let that 4:45 wake-up call, which was an accident by not Charlotte County, dissuade you from keeping those alerts on your phone. Alert Charlotte is a separate program, very similar, but they're alerts initiated by us for the most part, or the National Weather Service, and you pick what you want to be alerted on. You could pick everything on that list. I warn you against it because it's things like marine advisories and mosquito spraying alerts and things like that, and you'll be inundated with alerts. But even if you don't pick anything, it's the quickest way for me to tell you, based on the address you've registered on, your zone is evacuated, you need to go to another location. So I encourage everyone to sign up for Alert Charlotte. It's a free program. The state of Florida actually pays for it, but it's free to every resident in the state of Florida, and it is the quickest way that we can reach out and touch you on an email address, a house phone, a cell phone, all of the above, one of the above, whatever you want. But I encourage you, please take advantage of Alert Charlotte. In addition to that, throughout hurricane season, please pay attention to the local media. National media is great, but they don't give you the granular Charlotte County information. We're kind of in a special situation where we're wedged between a couple media markets. So I'd argue even our local media doesn't give us the best Charlotte County information all the time, but I guarantee you what you get out of the Fort Myers market or Sarasota market is going to be more specific to our location than what the Weather Channel, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC is going to give you. So please monitor your local media. If you're into social media, follow as many of the Charlotte County and City of Punta Gorda website or social media accounts as you want. Mine, the emergency management one, sends things out year-round about preparedness tips, about sales tax holidays, about anything emergency management related. But when we activate in advance of a storm, all of those accounts, whether it's community services, City of Punta Gorda, the Sheriff's Office, we're all sending out the same information, disaster critical information, and I will say for Ian, a huge volume of information was being pushed out. The problem was, when the winds died down and everything was, all the trees were down, the power was out, very few of us could just go to our cell phone, go to our TV, go to our computer, and get the information like we normally would. We rely very heavily on the digital world. So what we found out in the moment was there's a large segment of the population that is cut off right now. So in the moment, we printed off and went back to the analog version of just printing off information on sheets of paper. We put it in the hands of every first responder, every National Guardsman, every road crew, every road clearance crew, and we said, hey, get it out in the community. Go door to door if you have to. Get it to as many people as possible. We had it at our points of distribution. We'll continue to do that because when cell phones are out, when internet's down, when TV's out, there's nothing worse than being cut off from information, and we recognize that in the moment. In addition to that, we'll never tell you to stop getting radios with batteries. Radios tend to be pretty resilient. The radio waves are pushing out information after a storm. Please make that part of your kit. What we'll also be doing, and this is one of the locations here, is now going forward, all of our rec centers and libraries, if it's safe for us to get there, then most likely it's safe for you to get there. We will have information there. Even if it's just a bulletin board with with stapled on information and flyers you can take. We will have information there. So those are known locations, and this is something we really want to instill into all the residents of Charlotte County. Those are the locations that you can go to if you're completely cut off from information. As more time elapses from landfall, we hope to be able to add additional resources to those locations, whether that's a point of distribution, a charging center, bring in the what they call cows, cells on wheels, so you can get a cell signal to reach out to your loved ones. We'll try to get those resources there, but at the very, very least, if we can get there safely and you can get there safely, we will have some level of information that you can know where the pods are and know what's available out there, what radio stations are operating. And finally, talks like this are incredibly important. We challenge ourselves every year to get out in front of as many residents as possible. I see a few faces that I've seen at other talks before. I think one that I saw earlier today. We make it our mission. Our job during a storm is obviously the Emergency Operations Center, trying to get as many resources into the community as possible. But probably just as important, if not more so important, is these preparedness talks. Getting the residents of Charlotte County ready for upcoming weather, because it could be any given year, and I told this to the county commission, I really don't want anybody trying to play the probability game. That we just got hit by a Cat 4 hurricane last year, we had one 18 years before that, we're probably not due for a while. That's not how it works. I promise you. The fates of Mother Nature are not looking at who's up next. It's whoever's unlucky that year. And it could be us, it could be someone else, but we have to prepare the same way every year. And that's the best way to position yourself to be able to survive a storm afterwards.
Yes, and before I start, this is my first time on the panel, so I don't know if I've had as much practice as Patrick, but Charles, thank you for you and your team putting this together. How many of you guys sustained damage from the hurricane? How many are still waiting for that damage to be repaired? Takes a lot of patience, doesn't it? One of the things that Patrick said a while ago that I can't stress too strongly, and this is where the patients come in, is that Florida does have some of the best building codes in the nation. And that being said, in my experience, a lot of the damage that we have seen after the hurricane has been due to poor quality in installations, improper use of materials and things like that. Now, that doesn't mean that when the hurricane hit that you would have sustained no damage. But I do, in the places that I've gone, I question whether the damage had been as great or had been as substantial as it had been if the work had been done properly. The things that we have ran into that I think is pretty consistent with the other contractors that I have talked to is we have a material and supply shortage. There's, it's out there. And I was talking to Charles earlier. I've gone to Tampa, I've gone to Sarasota, I've gone to Venice, I've called out of state just to try to get materials to put people's houses back together. The other is just, like I said, shortage of labor, shortage of helpers. And so that is still ongoing. It's consistent across the board. On top of that, I'm sure you guys have started seeing that, no sooner are we repairing the damage that there's houses going up everywhere. So we're competing with that as well out there, that you're not just competing with other people that are trying to get their houses repaired, but you're competing with all these builders that are out there, taking resources and supplies and things of that nature. One of the things I did that I put together, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I think Charles said this is not in their packet, but the online packet. Is that correct? I'm going to go through this not too quickly, but just some helpful information that he asked when we were talking about when dealing with contractors. The first one is verify contractor's license. If a contractor, just because someone paints licensed and insured, anybody can take a couple of letters and put licensed and insured on their business card or anything. One of the things is a state law that if you're licensed, you have to have your contractor's license number on your advertising, marketing materials, your business cards and things like that. I've ran into some people that have come and asked me to help after the fact. It's like, well, this guy told me I was, he was licensed. I said, you verify his license? Well, no, he told me that he was licensed. Unfortunately, after a storm, as you know, there's a lot of vultures out there. There's a lot of good helpers. There's a lot of people that do come from out of state that have good intentions and have good companies, but a lot of not. It's pretty easy. I've got on there, you can either go to myfloridalicense.com, DBPR. You don't have to take all this down. I think, like I said, Charles is going to provide this to you guys in electronic form. It's real easy to put either a person's name or their contractor's license in there. I know it takes a little bit of time and you're in a rush, but it's going to make a big difference when the next storm comes or when you're trying to get work done later to have it done properly. You can also call the county building department. You can call them up. I think it's option number 1, and they'll be more than willing to help you to verify whether someone has been licensed. Because you have to be not only licensed by the state, but you also have to be certified in the county. So I mean, I have to get, if I'm working in Charlotte, I have to be certified in Charlotte in addition to Sarasota, Hillsborough, wherever you go. Another thing that comes up quite a bit and run into it often is handyman. I understand because I came to Florida with 30 years of building experience and I got licensed here in Florida so I could do business. I run into guys and they said, I did it up in wherever they came from and I don't need to get a license. Here's the thing. The way you do it in Pennsylvania versus California versus Texas versus Colorado is not how you do it here in this state. And a handyman does not have that knowledge or that experience. By law, by statute, anything over $2,500 is outside of a handyman's field. Now, if you got small repairs, I do recommend, use a handyman for these small jobs and stuff like that. You're probably not going to get a contractor to come do those small jobs. But if you're getting your house repaired after the storm, most likely it was over $2,500, I would imagine. Probably a lot more than that. And that was one of the things, so I'm actually not a general contractor, I'm a certified residential contractor. There's 3 different levels out there. There's certified residential contractor, I can do up to 3 stories, residential, multifamily, and things of that nature. A building contractor can do up to 3 stories, and that is both commercial and residential. A general contractor can pretty much do anything you want them to do. But for what you guys need, a CRC, which is a certified residential contractor, and that's a state licensed contractor, or a CBC, which is a certified building contractor, can handle what you need. Same thing though, they should have a license number that says CRC, CBC, or CGC that you can go real easily to the website. Not only will you verify whether their license is good, but you can also look and see if there's been any complaints. And that's another thing. I know, the state does their best to try to monitor this, but you can see if complaints have been filed against the individual as well, and obviously make your judgment on that. Going back to the patients, there is a statute, or there is allowance in the statute for a property owner to be a general contractor. And I understand that is very tempting, especially when you're waiting for things to get done. First of all, is if you do that, you are signing an affidavit that says you are a general contractor. You're signing an affidavit that says you're going to get up on that roof and you're going to supervise these guys and you're going to pay these people as 1099 or W-2 employees. You're taking legal liability in regards to damages and accidents and things of that nature. I recall going to the permit office quite a bit, and there were people that tried to do that, and I understand that. But I think when it gets back to the building codes and having your house prepared for the next hurricane to survive, it's unfortunately not the best route. Unless you were a contractor and you know what you're doing, then most likely it's better to hire someone that knows what they are doing. Another thing that Charles and I talked about is choosing the right contractor. things I had on there is what type of projects are they worked on? Have they done what you're asking them to do? I mean, there's a lot of specialties out there. And, you want people, if you got a tile roof guy, you don't want a guy that does all asphalt roofs. Same thing with metal roofs. If you got, whatever you're having done, you want someone that knows what they're doing. What about you? Second thing, and this is something I've always stuck by, get a detailed scope of work on the work that you have done. Don't have somebody, I see these quotes that says, hey, I'm gonna fix this and it's gonna cost you, $10,000. Well, what are they gonna fix? I mean, don't hesitate to hold them up and say, I wanna know exactly what you're gonna do and what you're gonna charge me to do it. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have that detailed scope of work, that's where these guys will sit there and make a ton of money and they'll come back and go, well, this wasn't included, that wasn't included, and then you end up paying the price. Ask for references. I think some of this is common sense, but, ask them to provide references. They should have people that they can tell you that have done the work before, and most recently, not something that they did 10 years ago, to give you, reference that, hey, these people know what they're doing, they did a good job for me, you can trust what they're doing. I will say that for my business, I don't advertise, mine is word of mouth. I think that's the best advertisement you get is when people refer you. So, ask someone else who they used and get information from that. Don't just take it off of an ad. Pulling permits. Has anyone ever had someone say, hey, don't worry about that, I don't need a permit? I will admit that pulling permits is not always the funnest thing that I get to do. And I will also say that Charlotte County has done a good job staffing up to deal with the influx. The last report I got, they had a 2,000% increase in permit requests for work, even though 90% of that is being done online. So, I mean, that's, considering how backed up they are, it's pretty good. The issue is a permit is there to protect you. First of all, if a guy tells you, or a lady or whatever, says, hey, don't worry about this, I don't need to pull a permit, I would question that. I mean, why do they not want to pull a permit? Second it is that, Charlotte County sends inspectors out to inspect the work. They do it. Sometimes they might not do it to the extent that someone might like it, but at least you got a second pair of eyes that's looking at the work to make sure that it's being done properly, and that goes back to the codes. The other is going back to having patience. If a contractor is not going to be patient to allow you time to make your decision, then I would say go on to the next person. I can't overestimate patience enough. Another thing that I've seen that I have highly recommended is as a public adjuster. These storms cause catastrophic damage. Insurance companies are in to mitigate their losses. The adjuster that works for the insurance company is representing the insurance company. I have not had a single person that has taken that advice that did not come back and say that I appreciate you recommending that, and that's been a tremendous help to me. A public adjuster, you need someone, and it's not going to be a contractor. We don't have time, and legally we're not allowed to do what a public adjuster does. Insurance companies a lot of times will tell you to get your contractor to go out and do that work. That's not the job as a contractor for us to do that. That is not our job, and we're legally prohibited from negotiating with your insurance company. All we can do is take what the insurance company does and try to work off of it. A public adjuster will take the stress off of your shoulders. I don't get any benefit from that. I'm not making any money from that. I don't get any, the benefit is from you. And if I had one piece of advice to give people after a storm, is get someone that knows how to work with the insurance carriers. They have to be certified just like the adjusters, and let them take on a lot of that. That will take a lot of stress off of you by using the public adjuster. And wherever you're at, it's not too late depending on where you're at the claim, to do that now. I know a lot of these are going to appraisal, which is basically like mediation, but that's much better to get you what you deserve or based on what your policy should pay, than just taking the money. Because I was talking to a gentleman that owns a public adjusting company, and I was telling him in my experience, and it was just a gut number, that insurance companies typically pay 25%, so 25 cents on the dollar of what a claim should pay. He said their statistics show that's more like 13 to 15%. So that first check, I want to be careful since we're being filmed on this, but that first check is just never, that first check might look nice, but you know, and the thing is, it's your house, and you want it put back right, and you want it put back the way it should be. Other than that, I think I'm going to pass it, and I'm looking forward to your questions and whatever I can do to help. So thank you. Thank you for your time.
Hello, everybody. We're going to cover some mental health aspects, and it's not that you have any mental health issues. That's not what we're saying, but there is a lot of stress and coping and grounding yourself, right? Being resilient, being able to come through these disasters and be able to repair, right? Not just your homes and your property, but your own mind, right? We're in another hurricane season. We are in the midst of it. There's already named storms out there. They are sitting there, they are waiting, right? They're like sharks waiting to attack, right? So what these gentlemen said is absolutely wonderful, because we teach the same things to people. We are actually from Project Hope. We are a free hurricane disaster recovery program literally for everybody. Everyone qualifies. We work through Charlotte Behavioral Healthcare here in Punta Gorda. Free. Everything is free. You don't, like, literally, there's no qualifications. We help everybody with anything that you need that's hurricane related. So us being able to talk about mental health for a change related to the disaster is a privilege, because so many people have not even processed the last hurricane, and we're back in the season. So preparedness is huge. Preparedness, we really do preach that, you know, use what you learned from this storm to prepare for the next, right? If you were inadequate in any way, whether it was batteries, food, we have a table full of resources back there. We have a FEMA hurricane disaster packing checklist. You know, I know a lot of people start packing their hurricane box, they get distracted and they never go back to it. That's a problem, because like these gentlemen said, we have some kind of a disaster year round. So it's not just, well, let's wait till June and let's get some food in there and some pet food, you know, and then we'll reduce stress. The way you can reduce stress is by being prepared, right? If you had damage to your home window-wise and you know, now you have better windows, you still can use that information to better prepare, right? If you had some, I don't want to say storm surge, because that's an excessive amount of water. I had water building up that came up to my home, but it wasn't invading my home. But you can still, there's things you can do if you want to prepare, right? You can get sandbags, you can line them around your house just to kind of try and deter it. You know, Cindy learned that towels do not help if you stack towels. They were a little surprised by the amount of water that infiltrated their home. So I'm going to go over some things about different kind of reactions that can be delayed reactions. We learned that a lot of people did not face immediate reactions. It's kind of like grief. Like sometimes it takes a while to sneak up on you and for you to realize what happened. I know a lot of people realize that like 6 months after. They're like, oh my gosh, look at how far we've come, but look at how far we have to go. So there are obviously immediate reactions that you would face with the disaster, but like I said, I'm going to go over some of these. All these resources are at the back table, so I won't ruminate them on too much. I know there's still a lot of people to speak. So you can become irritable, right? I mean, that's obviously common sense, right? You can get angry, you can be irritable, short-tempered, you can be hostile. On the opposite course, you can become depressed. We see this a lot. It doesn't mean you have depression. Being depressed over an event or over a situation does not mean that you have a mental health disorder and that you have major depressive disorder. It's not what it means. Everybody gets down at some time, especially when there's something like this happening in the community. Even those we have met through this process that had no damage to their homes, your community was damaged, right? I actually live in Port Charlotte, but even, like I said, homes that were damaged, that were prepared, we lost so many things in our communities, right? We had grocery stores that weren't open. There's still gas stations that aren't repaired, that aren't open. There's still a lot of things that we have the remnants of that are going to affect your mental health, right? Mood swings, instability, fear of a trauma recurrence. That's a big one, right? Being in hurricane season again, it's re-traumatization, right? Even if you don't feel like, I feel like I wasn't that emotionally distraught after this hurricane. It was my first one. I've been in Florida for 3 years. I come from the Midwest. I come from Ohio. We had tornadoes, we had ice storms, we had, hellacious snow, whatever. This is not the same. I want to say we did have a hurricane kit, and I actually over-prepared. I had enough food probably to feed the whole neighborhood for a month. Because I was nervous. I didn't know what to expect. And we did get hit pretty hard. So those feelings can come back, right? As soon as hurricane hits, I had people that were like, I'm not even prepared from this one. How do I emotionally deal with a possibility of another one, right? It's huge. So it can be emotional detachment, right? Isolation is a big problem. Many people were displaced. Many people had to go somewhere, whether it be a shelter or another family's home, where they were away from their friend groups. They were away from their activities. And some people still aren't back in their homes. Isolation can cause depression, right? It can cause suicidal ideation. I mean, it can be extreme, or it can just be, hey, I'm lonely and I have no one to talk to. Almost everyone I've met in Florida has come from another part, right? They weren't born in Florida. So a lot of your families are in other places. I had trouble reaching my in-laws in Michigan. They wanted to know, were we okay? What are they seeing? The worst things on the news that you could see, the worst devastated areas, people missing, and so people think the worst. So setting up a plan for that, like if you don't hear from me by this time after the hurricane hits, 3 days, whatever it is, because we did have spotty cell phone coverage too. We'd be driving down Tamiami, we'd hit a spot that we'd be able to tuck my son up in Tampa, and we pull over, put our 4-ways on, say we're okay, wait for his response, and then we drive on. So these are the things though that you learn, right? Relationships can be severed. Again, if you're separated, people have had to go to opposite shelters, especially if you have pets. If you have a large amount of pets, Cindy's a prime example of that. Her and her fiance had to separate with their pets because there was just not enough preparation done. So we all learn from our mistakes. You can do the same thing with your mental health, right? If you're emotionally prepared for what could happen, I always say plan for the worst, hope for the best, right? I don't feel like that's being pessimistic. It's saying that if something bad happens, you're prepared, but if it doesn't, then good, then you're set, right? You don't have to worry about it. You're not going to be displaced. And sometimes displacement it's just part of the deal, right? If you have to evacuate your home, you know what? Homes can be replaced. It's not easy, and I'm fighting my insurance company right now too, but your life is what's important, right? You can move on, and you can deal. We can deal with the mental health. We can do counseling. We can do support groups. We're actually offering support groups starting up here in July for everyone to come. There's no registration. They're free, and it's just to talk about what have you been through, what are your worries moving forward, things of that nature. So physical reactions could be sleep disturbances, nightmares, insomnia, appetite issues, either increased or decreased. Long-term health effects. If you've already have physical health issues, that can stress you out because they could be exasperated by the storm. If you can't get to physical therapy, right? If you can't go get your walking in because the parks, there's trees blocking the roads. Whatever it is, it can be literally anything. This is going to stress your mental health. It's going to stress how you're coping with things. So with that said, you need to make sure you have your support systems, right? Who can you count on locally so that if you're both displaced, you can talk to each other? Having that support system is huge. It's huge to know who you can count on, and who you can talk to and who you can reach out to and say, listen, I'm really struggling right now, And just for someone to give you that, you know what, I'm with you, I get that. Sometimes you just need that reassurance and that camaraderie and that peer support that will keep you in the right headspace. It'll keep you grounded, like, okay, this isn't gonna last forever. This one did last a long time. We were for a long time, but it didn't last forever, right? It did end. And then, and we're rebuilding. And it's gonna take us a while. But as long as you're mentally prepared for that this isn't gonna happen overnight, then your stress level it'll remain lower. Cognitive reactions, you could have harder times making decisions. It's not because you have a mental health issue. It is mental health related, but it's also trauma related. We went through a horrific tragedy. Again, community, individually, as a whole. That can cause you to be so stressed out that your brain cells aren't snapping the same way, right? Your synapses are not, it's just not working. So you can have you can have word finding problems. Believe me, that's what happened to me. It's like I have 100 thoughts going through my head, and sometimes you just can't find that word until 5 minutes later. That doesn't mean you have dementia. That's not what it means. It could. I'm not going to dismiss that. I'm not a doctor, but listen, it happens, and trauma is a very large cause of that. So we have a sheet of 99 coping mechanisms back there too that will give you things to help lower your heart rate, right? Lower your stress level. How to bring you back to being grounded, whether it's crafting or fishing or going for walks, listening to music, playing cards. Get back to your social activities. Plan your social activities. Be accountable for those. Your mental health depends on it. I am telling you, it's not just words. It's not things that people say because they want you to go pay to go do something. Listen, there's a million things out there to do for free. There really, truly is. And just getting together with other people is going to help your cognition. It's going to help your mental health. Everybody needs somebody that has an extra shoulder, right? A shoulder to cry on, to commensurate with, right? It really is important. So try to not re-traumatize yourself. Don't think, oh my gosh, I was in the middle of that and this was happening and I can hear the trees. Don't want to re-traumatize y'all, but don't put yourself there, right? Like they were saying, every storm is different. Even if we get another Cat 4 or even a Cat 5, we still may not have the same storm surge in the same places to the same depth, right? Someone who didn't get flooded last time may get flooded. So again, prepare both mentally and physically, and that's going to help keep your stress level down. Because if you don't, and then something hits, then you not only have that immediate stress, but you have the delayed stress. Is not only was I not prepared, but now I have to figure out what I'm going to do that I wasn't prepared, right? It's going to create more anxiety, more stress. There are warning signs and risk factors for emotional distress. Again, they are back there, but it involves eating or sleeping too much or too little. And I say that, it's like, what? If you didn't sleep last night, it doesn't mean you're having traumatic issues. I just want to reiterate that these are just scenarios that we're putting out there to make you realize that, you may need to talk to somebody. We do crisis intervention for free. We are limited to about 5 visits per person because we're a very limited group, and we're a temporary program. So, but pulling away from people, right? Secluding yourself, isolating yourself from events, from family, from friends, from neighbors even. You got used to being in your house, 2 years for COVID, and then they said, go back out and find your new norm, find your things to do, and then you get smacked with a hurricane, you're like, oh, I just started doing my stuff again, and now it's down again. So you need to have backup things that you can do to keep your mind in a good headspace. You need to have backups. If you can't get out on your bike and go for a bike ride, or if your paths are blocked because there's trees down and signs down and, whatever it is, again, be prepared. Make a list of things that you enjoy doing. Get, adult coloring books and colored pencils. That'll keep your mind off of things when you're going through this, either during or even after, right? There wasn't a whole lot we could do after. Nothing was open. We're kind of stranded in our houses. So, make sure you have a deck of cards, if you like to play cards, or word searches, or something that's non-electronic that we're all used to playing apps on our phones or our iPads. It's important to have things to distract your mind, in the midst of this. We sat there with the weather radio in the laundry room that we had moved the appliances out because it was my only room without windows. So, there's 3 of us crammed in there with a cat and a dog and a bed, and all we could do was hear the storm going through the heater vent, right? Because we had disconnected, so it's all you hear. So you hear the wind and the rain, you hear things hitting, and you wonder what it's hitting and what. Again, be prepared. This is going to happen. What's possible. What these winds can do. What waters can do. If waters can move a car, imagine what they can do to a standing home. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to mentally prepare you. So, real quick, worrying is obviously a sign. Excessive smoking, drinking, or drug use, and that includes prescriptions. It includes, taking more of your anti-anxieties or things like that. That's not healthy. There's other things that you can do. Feelings of loneliness. It can be other people isolating you. Is that either they're displaced? We have a lot of resources for children as well and helping children cope with trauma. Giving children ways to cope. You know, everybody understands things differently. There was a little boy who was placed on his counter standing up because water was rising in their home, and they wanted to make sure he didn't drown while they did other things, trying to prepare for the water that was impeding their home. Now, every time it rains, he asks the parents if he's gonna get to stand on the counter. So as cute as it is, it's scary because the children don't understand. They know something bad happened, it caused a lot of damage. Some kids were displaced and are living with grandma or grandpa, so they're away from their schools, they're away from their friends, and they're away from their peer supports too. Children have a peer group, right? So just like we do, so you need to maintain those and keep yourself from being isolated. We have, the insecurity of not knowing what's going to happen, right? We don't know what's going to happen with our home. We don't know what's going to happen in the community. Please utilize these emergency alert systems. I am on them. I got woken up that morning at 4 something, and boy, I was beside myself because I had to go to work, and I'm like, right now I'm up and I have 2 hours left before I have to get up and go to work. So, but they do work. The weather radios, please. Amazon has them. You can get them for $30. You don't have to buy a $150 one. You just need to make sure it has the NOAA weather bands on it. They have them where they're cranked. You don't even have to have batteries. You crank them, and for every minute of cranking, it lasts an hour. It's not a hard crank. Please prepare yourselves. Being preoccupied with your own thoughts. Don't get inside your own head. Don't get inside your own head, because who's your worst enemy? You, right? You start thinking, and you start thinking the worst, and then the worst, and then even worse, and then, oh my gosh, and then it spirals, right? Don't even go there. Yes, this could happen, but what if it doesn't? We'll be prepared for it, but you know what? We're going to live like it's not going to happen because we don't know.
Hi everyone, I'm Cindy. I'm Project Hope's team lead. Thank you all for coming and joining us. I'm going to try not to overlap with Christine, but there is a lot of mental health information to cover, so I think I can do that. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how the brain works briefly. So if this is your brain, my fist, then the front of your brain is here in this is your human part that does thinking, the problem solving, the things that we don't expect other animals to necessarily do, engineering, stuff like that. And if you were to look inside the brain, around your thumb is your amygdala. That's the part of your brain that does the fight, flight, or freeze reaction. So when danger is sensed, it activates, and it can allow you to fight or be angry, run away or be scared, or get spaced out and freeze, like a possum plays dead, or like people might freeze in danger so that the predator doesn't notice or whatever. So when the amygdala under the amygdala is the hippocampus, and that's the part of your brain that stores your normal memories, like what is your dog's name, what did you eat for breakfast, what day is it, stuff like that. So it's usually storing the memories, but when you have a traumatic situation and the amygdala is activated, you kind of flip your lid. And what I mean by that is that the prefrontal cortex, the part that does the thinking, decision-making, remembering, it kind of has to get out of the way. The amygdala kind of takes over, and then the hippocampus, the part that does the normal memories, jumps in to help. It sends chemicals to the amygdala to help it with the fight, flight, or freeze. And so because the brain is responding in a different way, the memories don't get stored in the file drawer like the way they normally would. So normally the stuff, what's your dog's name is, all that, it gets filed all in good order and you can access it easily. But when a trauma happens, like for me, the storm surge flooding in my home, it kind of gets like crumpled up and stuffed in there. You have to pull it out and sort it out later. Now, not everyone is going to have a traumatic reaction to a hurricane. It depends on how much it impacted you and what is your resilience and coping level to deal with that impact that it did have on you. But I mention it because trauma is a common reaction, and even if you don't have trauma, you may have anxiety, anger, other reactions that are related to this. So anytime something may remind you of a hurricane or that was traumatic, your prefrontal cortex might go offline again. You might feel excessive anger, excessive anxiety, spaced out. And so that's why you can't necessarily think straight. You can't remember as well, you can't problem solve as well, and that's why a program like ours can be helpful, because not only does a disaster give you extra problems to deal with, but it stresses you out so much that it's harder to think about how to solve your problems than it is in daily life, because it's so overwhelming. So what our team does is we can kind of sit and handhold people, figure out what are their priorities, what are their next steps, sit with them while they make phone calls or fill out FEMA appeal paperwork, et cetera, to help people work through that stuff, because it gets overwhelming, not only emotionally, but also cognitively. I think Charles asked us to talk about anger. Even if you don't get a full-blown trauma reaction or full-blown PTSD, you can get like a smaller reaction, and that can include anger or anxiety. To know if you have excessive anger is if you are feeling concerned that you're out of control, if you feel like you're angry all the time, or you find yourself angry at small things, if you find yourself frequently regretting the consequences of your anger, you may want to take a step back, take a time out until you can calm down from a situation. You may need to learn problem-solving skills to address the problems that are making you angry, or learn assertive communication. So not being overly aggressive, but not being passive. Being able to express your feelings constructively. You may need to ask for help. So let's see, behavioral. You talked about the behavioral reactions and the isolation. You talked about the physical reactions. We met a lady at another event that was having heart palpitations. Turned out to be stress related, and she was able to resolve that. So people don't realize the myriad of reactions that people can and do have after a disaster, and most people don't develop a full-blown disorder. Most people are resilient, but for all of us who were impacted heavily, it is very normal to have a reaction. So you don't need to feel like there's something wrong with you or there's any shame in it. It's just your brain it's a normal way of dealing with an abnormal or overwhelming situation. So scheduling positive activities, Christine mentioned that. Sometimes hurricanes can get in the way of those things, like all my hobby-related stuff got wet, or being displaced, or your family being displaced, or being too busy working on the house. All kinds of things can get in the way of you doing things that are positive for your mental health. And it's important to schedule and make sure that you do those things anyway, because that is going to help you stay resilient so that you have that mental health strength to be able to move forward with recovery and prep for the next season. Managing reactions. If you do have a traumatic stress reaction, if you do have, and that's not to say if you have full-blown PTSD, but if you have any sort of flashbacks or nightmares or disturbing memories of Hurricane Ian or other disaster, grounding is one way to deal with it. And grounding is a longer topic that I want to get into, but the most basic type of grounding that I usually recommend is to pay attention to what your five senses are noticing in the now. So if the past is bothering you, pay attention to what you can see, hear, feel, taste, and touch. And that can help you pull your brain away from those past memories and bring you back into what's going on right now. And people don't realize that that's a skill that's always accessible to us. I love coloring books, I love fidget toys, I love all those kind of things, but it's nice to know that you can have a tool that you carry with yourself everywhere, and that is your five senses. And another tool that you can carry with yourself anywhere is breathing. So being able to count your breaths, slow down your breaths, breathe more deeply from your abdomen rather than just from your chest, paying attention to your breathing. All of these things are helpful ways to use your breathing to calm down. And another thing that's important is having a way to process your feelings. So Christine was talking about that support, which I agree is invaluable. If you don't have friends or family that you can rely on, you can talk to a professional. You don't always need a professional. Sometimes you may need another way of expressing your feelings, like journaling, making art, just something that helps you process what you're going through. Another tool that is helpful is being aware of your thoughts. So something that therapists talk about a lot is how our thoughts, feelings, and actions all relate to each other. So sometimes we can have thoughts in response to a disaster that are not that helpful to us. So for example, thinking to ourselves, I should be coping better. My reactions mean that I'm going crazy. Something must be really wrong with me. Those type of thoughts are gonna make you feel like you're fearful, like you're less than. Some more positive thoughts would be like most people would have trouble after an event like this. These reactions are only temporary. The fact that I'm asking for help proves that I am coping a little bit, then you're gonna feel better. Other thoughts might be things will never be the same again, I have no control over anything. Those type of thoughts will leave you feeling helpless and unable to take the next step of action to recover your home and your lives and make disaster preparedness for the next season. So some helpful reminders would be like, I can control some decisions about my future, doing things gives me a greater sense of control, and you can help, that will help you feel more open to the future, more positive, able to take steps forward. Some thoughts may come up about safety, thinking the world is dangerous. The world is not always safe, but it is not always dangerous. So unfortunately, we have to learn to live with the truth being in the middle and, planning for the best, but preparing for the worst. Sometimes people feel guilt after a disaster. I should have prevented this. I should have evacuated. I should have done this or that to my home, etc. And that is going to leave us feeling guilty, feeling dislike for ourselves. And some more helpful thoughts would be, at the time I did the best I could. Nobody could have prevented this. A bad person would not be feeling guilty about this. It's because I care so much that I feel bad. Sometimes people have thoughts of blame and anger. It's their fault. This happened. It is unfair. A lot of unfair things happen after hurricanes in our recovery. When we're trying to rebuild and things don't work out the way we want to. But unfortunately, blaming others doesn't change the situation. So a more healthy thought might be others may be to blame, but I need to focus energy on myself and my family, or sometimes bad things happen to good people. So those are just a few examples of unhealthy versus healthy thoughts. We talked about being prepared, healthy social connections, getting help. So there's no shame in having mental health challenges. I've had mental health challenges in my life. I'm not embarrassed by it. When I went to get my master's degree in counseling, they required us to start getting counseling in order to graduate. Many counseling programs will not let you graduate if you don't have the experience of being a recipient of counseling. So I started going, and I have never stopped and it's not that I go all the time, but I find it invaluable to have that objective person to know about your life and help you process your life, and have somebody that will always be there to listen to you. And it is, and that's not to say that this is better or worse than family or friends. You need your family or friends, but sometimes they may have their own issues that get in the way of them supporting you. And so it's okay to ask for help. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you.
My name is Officer Adam Brown. I'm with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. A lot of you probably are not maybe even familiar with our agency. If you're a transplant, you're from a different state. Basically, we're Department of Natural Resources, DNR, Game and Fish, whatever you may have had in your previous state if you're not local. Our job encompasses a lot. And so typically when people think of game wardens or Marine Patrol, they think of hunting licenses and fishing regulations and things like that, and certainly that's, top of our list most of the time. But we are one of the lead agencies when it comes to hurricane response, and that is because our officers are trained in all of the specialized equipment that comes in very handy after a hurricane. We have airboats, and we have swamp buggies and side-by-sides, helicopters, fixed wing, drones, we have amphibious vehicles. We've got all sorts of specialized equipment, and most of our officers are trained in just about all of that. So I'm not a helicopter pilot, but I can do just about everything else there. So anyway, that being said, I know that the folks that we just heard from, they kind of touched on a lot of the events that we just went through. It was pretty difficult. And I wanted to talk about a couple of things specific to us that we saw. We learned a lot from this storm. We learned a lot from the previous storm, Irma, as well. So I'd like to talk about boats and boating first, and then we'll get to a little bit in wildlife. But first off, anybody have a boat in here? A couple people. Anybody have a displaced boat after the storm? Yeah, okay. So back in 2017, I think it was, with Hurricane Irma, we had the most displaced boats we'd ever seen after a hurricane. And that basically rewrote the book for us on how to deal with displaced boats, how to minimize the impacts to our wildlife, to our environment, to our seagrasses, and things like that. That being said, we had somewhere around 3,000 boats displaced. Hurricane Ian had 7,000 boats displaced. So this is the real game changer. It was unbelievable, and it still is unbelievable. You go out on the waterways. I know you guys have your boats, and you probably now had an opportunity to go out and explore a little bit, and you'll still see sunken boats all over the place. This is a very slow process. It's something that takes a lot of effort, a lot of money, a lot of time, and patience, as we already talked about. So when you have a displaced boat, in your particular situation, were you able to handle that on your own, or did you have to hire somebody, or what did we do?
I had to hire, it had to be found first, thanks to your team, actually tracked it down and let me know, and it ended up several miles away from where it was moored.
Wow.
And in a house, actually.
Oh my gosh.
So it was a bit of a precarious situation, and I did have to get my insurance involved, I had to get contractors involved. It was quite a mess.
Yeah, it's exhausting, and of course you're dealing with other issues on top of that. You've got your own home to deal with, you've got your family, and you've got your pets and those kinds of things. But unfortunately, your boat is in someone else's home, and so it's still your responsibility. And so, how exhausting is that? These are a lot of things that we learned. We worked with the FDEM, the Florida Division of Emergency Management. We worked with U.S. Coast Guard, and we worked with local agencies to try and assess how many boats we have, how quickly we can get them removed, how many people like yourself that can actually have the means and ability to remove them on your own, or how many people that was everything they had. They don't have the funds, they don't have the means or ability to get that boat removed. Well, we still can't leave that boat in somebody's home. And so we still need to go ahead and contact the right contractors and get that boat out of there. So that was a lot we learned. Patience is number one. If you have the ability, if you've got insurance, make sure you're photographing your boat prior to a storm. Make sure you're working with authorities to try and document where it ended up and the condition that it's in. That's why you have insurance. If you don't, then there are opportunities out there. Our agency actually created a waiver program to where if you didn't have the ability to remove your boat on your own, you can actually sign that boat over. Unfortunately, oftentimes these boats are complete loss. And so even if you did remove the boat from someone's house, there may not be any value there anymore because you've got holes in your boat, your motor's been ripped off, the T-top's down, whatever it may be. And so you can actually sign that boat over to the state and we'll remove it at no cost to you and we'll take it to a landfill. Now again, that process is very slow. I know we're short on time, so I'm going to kind of segue a little bit. I know we also love Southwest Florida for the waterways, but the waterways are still kind of unsafe. They're not exactly the way they should be. It'll take probably a very long time, especially as you continue to go south. Channel markers are missing. Channel markers are broken. Regular signs that you see, manatee slow speed zones and those kinds of things, they're not in the place that they should be or in the condition that they should be. the cost of replacing a stop sign, I'm not sure, but basically you can have a guy with a truck go out there and replace a stop sign in an afternoon. That's not the case when it comes to a channel marker. You have to hire a crew, they have to bring a barge, they have to have a crane on that barge, it takes several hours, and it tends to cost somewhere between $1,200 to $1,500 per sign. So you can imagine when every single channel marker, as far as you can see, is gone, we have to still assess and figure out where that channel is, if that channel has shifted, because they do shift. With the storm surge that we had come in and go back out, now suddenly the channel has moved 20 feet and it's over here. And so you need to make sure you're cognizant of that. Don't operate your boat directly after a storm. I know we had a lot of looky-loos and people that want to get out there and they see these amazing things and they see the destruction, but that's what we have news crews for, that's what we have first responders for. You'll be able to see that stuff eventually on social media, on television, whatever it may be. But it's not safe for you to go out on your own and actually see these things. We were literally running over vehicles while we were on our boats. We're in dark water. I'm in a marked channel. I'm looking on my GPS and I know I just ran over a car. There were RVs all over the place, cars all over the place. So the cleanup process is going to be a long time, but just make sure that you're being patient, as we talked about, to try and get back out there on the water. From here north, the water's not too bad. From here south, it's still pretty bad, especially when you get into Lee and Collier County. And we'll quickly segue into wildlife. Wildlife is a big portion of what I do. Regulated wildlife, hunting, deer and alligators and things like that. But of course, we also have protected species in Florida. And wildlife were displaced just like we were displaced. The floodwaters came up and their homes are now gone. Trees are gone, dens are gone. And so let's briefly talk about how unsafe it may be to actually go into some of those floodwaters. I don't know about you, but I had about 4.5 feet in front of my house. I was fortunate. I did not get it into my house like a lot of you. However, I could not leave. My street was flooded. And so when you're in waters like that, you need to understand that that's now, you didn't maybe have waterfront property before, but you do now. So you've got alligators in there, you've got snakes on the move, you've got ants, fire ants that like to float around on the top. I've been bitten by a mound of fire ants that I was in waist deep water trying to cut somebody's tree, and it attacked me and I had ants all over me. It was pretty terrible. You also have down power lines, and so you have the possibility of being electrocuted in some of these areas. So do not wade into those waters. Wait for that water to recede. Wait for some of those emergency crews to come through and actually clear that area to make sure that you're safe to go out there. The repairs on your home. You may have damage to your soffits, your roof, walls, garage, whatever. And after a while, we know that the process for repairing these things is very slow. And you may have to do some repairs on your own just to make sure that you're not inviting wildlife to come and set up camp. That does happen pretty regularly. You may have a hole in your home or a hole in your soffit, and suddenly a burrowing owl that burrows on the ground, but his burrow is still underwater. They have to go somewhere, and so they will actually sometimes create little burrows up into your home, and it can be very difficult and costly or be a detriment to you and the wildlife to have them removed. Same with snakes. Same way, I mean, we all kind of cringe about some of these critters that we don't necessarily want in our homes, rats, things like this. So if you've got the ability to go ahead and close that up, seal it up, even if it's just temporary until you can get a professional to come in and do the proper job, close those up so we're not inviting the wildlife into our own home. If we have displaced wildlife, that happens all the time, especially with storm surge. We get manatees that get stuck on sandbars. The water comes in so fast, they get pushed in, and they are strong swimmers, but when the water goes back out, suddenly they're stuck there. And we get a lot of people that will see that, where they'll go out and they'll want to try and help. That's great, but you have to leave that to the professionals. That's not something that we encourage the public to go do, because you can so easily hurt yourselves and hurt the wildlife. We have tons of instances when a dolphin or a manatee or a whale have beached themselves on accident or on purpose, and good Samaritan folks go out there and try and assist, and they end up causing more harm or actually killing that animal because of what they were trying to do, pulling it off incorrectly. And oftentimes they'll beach themselves on purpose because there's something wrong, and they actually need to be taken in, collected, and taken to a research facility to be treated for whatever illness they may have. And by putting it back in the water, you're not giving those responders an opportunity to collect it and take it to the proper vets and those kinds of things. And finally, I know we're short, debris removal. Debris removal took forever. We had big piles of couches and fences and things that are out in front. There are two things that I want you to think about with that. Number one, those actually make pretty inviting homes for different types of wildlife. So keep that in mind. There's only so much we can do when we're waiting on people to come and collect. But you can be cognizant of it, and you can be keeping your pets away from some of those things because you don't know if there might be a venomous snake underneath that stack of wood. You don't know if potentially a bobcat has now created a den inside this little pile in front of your home because all the trees are down right now and that's the best location that they could find. This is something we have seen, so keep that in mind. And number two, I know we're putting a lot of our debris out there, but try and avoid putting perishable items such as wasteful food out there because that becomes an attractant to raccoons, to bears, to coyotes, to bobcats, some of these things that, again, we don't necessarily, it's fun to see. We love to see them in Florida. That's why I'm here. That's why I do what I do. I love seeing wildlife, but I don't really want to see them 20 feet away from my home with my children and my dog. I'd like to do it at a little safer distance where I can just take a picture. So those are a few things to think about after the storm.
Hi, my name is Joan LaBelle. I'm the Urban Design Director for the City of Punta Gorda, and I'm also a licensed arborist. I am certified by the International Society of Arboriculture. And a lot of what was said today, great news. I've learned a lot just listening. But segueing from your discussion, the trees that are down after the storm. You look outside, you want to get them cleaned up. There is just so much potential safety issues that you need to be looking at. All of these storms can cause all of these down trees can cause more problems if you're not planning on how you're going to do it. If you want to take a look at each of those trees, have you called your insurance company to see if they need the photos of those trees that are downed? Some of your insurance policies actually pay for the removal of the trees. We learned that during Charlie. So there we got $300 to $400 per tree that was near our home that did any damage to the soffit, the roof, the windows. So take a look at that policy. Call your insurance company ahead of time. More people are injured after the storm when they're trying. Well, not more people, but there are a lot of people injured after the storm when they go out there to try to remove the trees on their own. I brought a chainsaw with me today to remind me to tell you that when you're using equipment that you are not used to, you really need to be very, very careful. If you have to go up on a ladder, it's not something you should be doing. The trees that block your driveways, your roadways, you can't move those. You really do need special equipment a lot of times. If you're trying to remove things that are in the roadway, you want to make sure your feet are on the ground. You want to make sure you have the proper size chainsaw. You want to be able to pick it up if you can. Anytime you have to look up and try to do something over your head, that is not what you're supposed to do. You hire somebody who has the equipment to get up in there, cut those branches smaller, bring them down. Most people are not equipped to do that. During Charlie, we lost 40 trees on our property. They were all over our driveways. We had to get special equipment in to move them aside, and then came the task of chopping all of those trees up. Thought when we got hit with Ian, oh, we're not going to have any problem. We lost another 26 trees, and they were the biggest trees on our property. So our oak trees were all gone. They were uprooted, and so trying to remove those uprooted trees was even worse. Do you save those trees? Can they be stood back up? The smaller the tree that gets uprooted, the better chance of survival. If you have large trees on your property and they are uprooted, very rarely will they survive. On our property, we did stand up a couple of the larger trees because they were in any way going to hurt a house or block any of the driveways. So we said, well, what do we have to lose? So we have a mango tree that is producing fruit this year. So we're hoping that we have saved it. We don't know because it is a larger tree. If this is the last fruit we get, well, at least we got one more season from it. But with your chainsaw, you always want to do, you want to take a look at the project that you're going to attack. So you want to devise a little bit of a plan. You want to work with somebody in your area. You don't want to do it by yourself. This type of work in Florida is very exhausting. You can overheat very easily. So you want to have somebody with you so that you can talk to, you can walk around the tree, decide how you're going to attack it. You survey the site, you identify the hazards where they are. Are they closer to a wire? You know, are there any wires above where the tree that you're going to be cutting? You know, do you have any utilities below ground that you're going to be picking up when you pick up the roots on some of these trees? Create a safe work zone by setting a perimeter around so nobody can come into them. You know, you have kids, you have dogs. If they're coming on into that work area, you don't want to be looking at the limb that you're going to be cutting and you have a dog or a child come in, you turn around and you've accidentally hit them. Shut your chainsaw off in between your cuts. You know, step back, take a look at it, take your breaks. Look for cracks in the trunk of the tree. If you're cutting something, where might that tree fall? If there's a crack in there, is it going to fall one way or the other? And even professionals make mistakes. At a recent seminar that I was at, they showed, you know, professionals who have their certification in tree trimming and tree climbing, and they did not properly tie off, or they forgot to do the weights on one side. And, you know, these people were hurt because the tree snapped back. Wear eyeglass, wear some sort of a helmet or a face guard. When you're out there cutting, what comes back and snaps back at you can cause eye damage, can, you know, lacerations. You end up at the hospital. So you really do want to be very, very careful when you go out there. Always read and follow the instructions on your equipment. I know it's simple. You always think we can do it ourselves. We know how to handle it. It's just a little piece. We start it up and we cut it. If you use the front of the chainsaw and you're just using the tip of it, it's going to kick back at you. So you want to be careful. You always want to cut closer to the base of the chainsaw. You always wear your protective equipment. You examine your trees. Keep both hands on the chainsaw. People who are trying to reach over and use one-handed, they could drop it. They could have it hit their leg. So you want to wear maybe chaps or something heavier on your leg wear. And again, that's why we say, if it just looks like it's too much for you, don't do it. Call somebody, be patient, as everybody has said. Wait for somebody to come who knows how to do some of that removal for you. The debris removal is heavy. It's unexpected if you're not used to seeing things fall, or how you make your cuts is very critical. If you cut too much of the branch close and it's heavy, it can split right down and drop in front of you. It can drop on you. So you just really want to be aware of those things that you're cutting. Cut at waist level, never go above your waist. You're just not balanced enough, and that chainsaws are heavy. I don't know how many of you have had them, but they are extremely heavy time after time after time. Take your frequent breaks. Make sure you're hydrated out there, because again, you're in the heat. Usually after a hurricane, the humidity, the heat, you're out there working all day trying to get your property back to some sort of normalcy so that you're feeling comfortable and back to something that resembles what life was like before the storm. Always keep the saw pointed downwards. When you're done cutting that piece, shut a piece of equipment off. Put it in neutral or shut it off altogether. Always cut away from your body. Never try to cut close to it or towards you. Again, you run the risk of lacerations. Make sure your presence is known again to people who are in and around the area. Always have somebody with you. Be extra careful when cutting anything that's bent or twisted, because you might lock up the chainsaw, things like that. Cut them into smaller pieces if you can, something that is manageable. And again, a lot of times, like on our property, we did have to have large equipment come in to move it because of the number of trees and the size of them. So be very careful when you're doing that. If you are going to try to save a tree, you do want to stake it up immediately. You want to get those roots, keep them damp, keep them moist. The smaller the tree, again, the better. You want to get them back standing and upright and back into the soil as quickly as possible. And then it is watering, it is monitoring the tree. You can reduce the canopy on it by cutting some of the branches off. You want to give that tree a chance to survive by not having it stress out more, trying to bring back some of those branches. Prior to the storm, some of the things you can do is look at your trees. Are they overgrown? Do they need to be lightened up? Big oak trees really should be reduced inside the canopy so that the winds can go through them. You want to be able to, if those winds are very heavy, we had one tree during Charlie that absolutely saved the back of our house. It took the force of the winds, and it was able to, it didn't fall. It was properly pruned prior to Charlie. Well, over the years, we let it go again, and this storm, the wind force was so much greater on our property, and it just took that tree down. So after 45 years, we lost our favorite oak tree. But again, you're not going to save every tree, but if you can reduce some of the canopy of it, you may be able to save some of your favorite trees. So with that, I think I'll end there, but there are some other things. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them on tree protection and things of that nature.
Well, Joan, I had a quick question following up on that, because I also had a favorite tree loss. Is there a right way and a wrong way to right a tree?
You want to try to get those roots back into the ground. You want to make sure that the root flare, the trunk of the tree, is just at the base, at the soil level. So when you're uprighting it, you may have to dig inside, underneath the roots in the hole that it came up out of. And you try to straighten it up. You might have to then add your fresh soil and water it in to make sure there are no air pockets. Again, the idea is to keep those roots moist and able to come back.
We have a question from the audience for Stacy. They were wondering if you had any advice for a damaged home that didn't have insurance. This person, FEMA wanted a contractor's estimate for damages that were assessed at about $159,000, but FEMA was only cutting a check for them for about $30,000. When you have a disparity of that, do you have any suggestions, thoughts?
I do know there is a program out there that could help towards that. I don't know how to make up that big a gap. That's a pretty huge gap. There is a program though called My Florida Safe. I think it's either My Safe Florida, My Florida Safe. They bring in a licensed inspector to come in and assess your house and assess its preparedness for hurricanes, looking at doors, windows, roof, and other parts. I believe there's up to $10,000 you can get from that, so that's one resource. I really, unfortunately, don't know of any other resources though to make up a gap of that amount. Unfortunately, I wish I had better information there.